Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to another live Xanadu Gallery Art Business Academy online critique group session. Today is Wednesday, April 14th, 2021. It is good to be here with you on a Wednesday morning or afternoon, depending on where you're located.
Mhm.
Just quickly by way of announcement, next Wednesday, as is our tradition, it's a third Wednesday, so it will be an Ask Me Anything session. So it's your opportunity to ask questions based on conversations we've had here over the last several weeks about artists and their work, or questions about your work, getting into galleries, selling your work, all those kind of things. So just keep an eye out for an email notice on that and a link to the form to submit questions for that session. Today's session, however, is a review of an online critique group member's work. And I'd like to welcome with us today Santana Star, who's joining us from California. Santana, good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
So as we like to do, Santana, let's begin by talking a little bit about your background and how you came to create artwork, and then we'll jump in and take a look at the artwork itself.
Well, I always loved art from very young, finger painting in kindergarten. I couldn't get enough of it. And, growing up, I used to dig clay and make pots. And then when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I met a Canadian British artist. I lived in Canada at the time where I grew up. And basically, I started studying art with her. And my goal was to become a painter. And it took me to the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design, where I did a foundation. But then fate took me to England, where I lived for 20 odd years and ended up having a family of 4 children. And then fate again took me after that back to California. And I hooked up with the art again and started with mandala paintings and worked with various groups and teachers, drawing, watercolor, acrylics, and oils. And I've fallen in love with oil painting. So that's my main medium at the moment.
And so let's go ahead and pull your work up and talk to us a little bit then about kind of how your background and maybe the different work that you've done over the course of your career, how it's culminated in the style of work that you are creating now.
Well, you'll see I've sent 2 different kind of ideas here. There are the florals and then landscapes. I always have loved color, but this particular painting, my son flew in flowers from Hawaii from Mother's Day, and I decided to paint it actual size. Yes, and so it's actually 40 by 30. It's a big painting, but that was what that one was about. But no, I love nature. I'm inspired by all the beautiful structures and forms in nature, and really try to capture the soul or the spirit of it in my paintings. So this is Hawaii. Near Hana, there's a very wild path you can take with the sea absolutely crashing and getting sprayed every so often. So that's where this painting originated.
And talk a little bit about technique and how you are thinking about composing the imagery and kind of your approach to putting paint on the canvas.
Well, I take photographs and I paint from a photograph, and this is actually down in Big Sur. This is a pathway through Andrew Malero State Park. But I just start with the photograph and the outlines, and then somehow I lose myself in the painting, and the colors can be quite different. I love color, and the colors are not exactly like the nature colors, but I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, yeah.
And this, yeah, this is Garrapatta State Beach in California. And the way the waves were crossing was just really beautiful to me. So that inspired this one.
And then I think I've got one other here.
And this is another of my floral. I have a whole series of the floral, which are different than the landscape. But all these paintings are actually oil paintings. And this is a vase I've got and a rose I had in it. But again, the colors turned out quite differently from the original photograph.
Okay, good. So that gives us a look at some of the compositions and subject matter. Let's take a quick look at presentation. And would this be fairly typical? Are most of your paintings done on box stretched canvases?
Yes, I work on canvas with gallery wrapped canvases, you know, about 1.5 inches thick. And this is the way I would, all of them are kind of presented.
Okay, good. So now, as is our tradition, I'd like to open it up and have an opportunity to talk a little bit about those of you who are here in the panel, get some of your impressions on the work. I'm going to do things, again, just a little bit differently this week, and that I want to try and put some emphasis on some of the submissions that were put in ahead of time via the form. A lot of times I get great submissions there and we get talking so much that I don't get a great chance to bring those in, but I do want to bring them in here. And our first comment is from Cassandra, also in California. And she says, wonderfully colorful and delightful compositions. Santana has a keen eye for balance and symmetry for both still life and seascapes, as well as for placement of vibrant colors and values. And I think we're going to see a lot of echo of the words vibrant and colorful, very descriptive and appropriate with your work. And you've already mentioned how important color is to you, and that often the color is not necessarily reflective of what's actually in an image or in your reference materials. I'd love to bring others in the panel in and get your comments on what you're seeing in the work. Do you feel the work is consistent, and what most strikes you in the work? And so if you're in the panel and want to throw a hand up or click on the raise hand icon, I'd love to get your commentary. And again, as usual, if I don't get volunteers, I will volunteer you. So let's go in. Let me go to Ellen first.
Okay, can you hear me?
Got you loud and clear.
Her work has a kind of a dreamy, almost fantasy quality, I feel, and it's very intriguing, and it draws you in. I went and I looked at her website, and I saw some paintings of the Grand Canyon that were very beautiful and very surprising, because I've been to the Grand Canyon. I've seen lots of pictures of it. And most of the time, Grand Canyon is painted in hues of red. And she uses blue, which is kind of surprising. But the effect that it had, that I felt, is that it made it look like it was in shadows. And it was very interesting. And I thought it was really cool, because art can express nature exactly, but it can express nature in a way you haven't seen it before, which I think makes it really interesting. And so I just wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, and we're going to see some other comments from artists who also went on your website, Santana, and looked at the work and had some commentary, and especially the Southwest imagery. But I think Ellen makes some interesting points, and I do think that this is an opportunity that an artist has. Yes, you can reflect what you're seeing, but you can also invite us to have an opportunity to maybe look at the world in a little bit different way. And I'm curious, Santana, what, as you have an opportunity to have people see your work and respond to it, what are you hearing them say about the artwork that you're creating?
They've said it's beautiful. That's been the main comments I've had. And it has hung in public places. So that's the main comment. People say they find it beautiful.
Yeah,
I try to create beauty. I try to make them beautiful, which is challenging.
well, and of course, with artwork, you know, there is both representation and there is interpretation, and so I think that we see in your work a lot of personality come through. I'm also curious, Santana. You mentioned that you're from Canada and has had some training. I see some, and maybe you can agree or disagree with me here, but I've always been interested in, and I hope I don't say this wrong, but I think it's the Group of Seven, the Canadian artists.
Right. Yes.
And I noticed that in their work, there's a lot of focus on color, on kind of blocking out various areas of the composition. And I wonder if you point to that as any kind of influence, or do you feel your work is kind of developed independently?
Well, at art college, I was slide librarian for a while, so I got to see a lot of art, and I loved magic realism, and I loved Henri Rousseau, and I loved, you know, the Impressionists. So I don't know. I feel I'm kind of I'm doing an impression, but I like the magical quality of capturing a moment in time, and that's part of it. So, but I have a calendar of the Group of Seven right now, but I don't feel they actually influenced me. Although I was friends with one of the son's daughters of one of those artists. Oh yeah, but no, but it's the magic realism and beauty, and you know, the impression of a place or the spirit of a place.
Your biggest influences.
Yeah.
What, in terms of what we're seeing here, and again, going back to the panel, do we feel the work is consistent? Do these, and of course, we're always looking at kind of a limited subset here, 5 pieces, 3 landscapes and 2 florals. Are they consistent? Do they feel like they've been done by one artist? Gay, let me go to you.
Hard to say.
There we go. I was actually thinking about that, and I think technically and color-wise, they're very consistent. And the way that you choose to emphasize or de-emphasize whatever it is you're painting and the qualities of it. But it's almost that there are 2 bodies of work here.
Yeah,
and I have to admit, I did not go to your website yet. I'm very sorry. But the flowers are one and the landscapes are another. And if I saw all the landscapes and then the flowers somewhere else, I might not immediately connect you 2 together.
Right.
Now, that's not a bad thing. That isn't a criticism. It's just what I just noticed looking. And I wondered if, how do you feel about that? What are you sensing in your own development?
Well, thanks, Gay. And basically, they are 2 different aspects of my work. So I just don't know if you would show one in one gallery and one in another gallery. But I agree with you. I totally agree. They could be painted by 2 different people.
Well, no.
No, and I think this is, and again, this is a discussion. I think this is a great conversation to have, because there can be a lot of confusion when I'm talking about consistency, or when you're worried about putting together a portfolio of work. Okay, how can I have different subject matter, and sometimes very distinctly different subject matter within my broader body of work, and still have that work be cohesive and consistent. And while I agree with Gay's comment that, okay, if I encounter them in different venues, I might not immediately make the connection. But I think the more important question is, if they were showing together and I was making my way through the work, would there be a kind of shock to the system moving from one to the other, where you say, wait a minute, this is the same artist? And I don't think that's the case here. Even though we make a transition in subject matter, the palette, in terms of the values and colors that are being used, which are vibrant and bold, that's going to be very consistent. I think the compositional elements are very consistent. And so even though we have some shift in subject matter, I see an underlying consistency there that I wouldn't have concerns about showing the work together. Now, the caveat there is that if I'm putting together a portfolio of the work, or if I'm going to show it in a gallery, I wouldn't want to have 8 of the landscapes and just 1 floral. That
No.
floral then ends up feeling like an orphan. But if I had, 5 of the landscapes and 3 or 4 of the florals, then I think you start to get this feeling that, okay, here's an artist who is interested in a variety of subjects. The theme, nature, is consistent, but the subject matter varies a little bit, and we see some range and some diversity.
Yeah.
Now, I want to introduce another comment, and this actually comes from Jeff Green. And Jeff, I see I've got you here. Maybe instead of me reading your comment, I'd like to get your commentary. You made note on the website of the Southwest series, and I'd love to get your commentary there. I'm going to pull one from the website and show it here. Morning, Jeff.
Good morning. Yeah, I just found this work to be the most compelling and the most engaging. And for me, it had a different kind of depth that I found myself more drawn to. And I was surprised kind of that you didn't show us one of these, Santana. So part of it was, I was curious about why you chose the 5 images you chose and didn't include one of these.
Well, I chose my more recent paintings, and I chose all oil paintings, but this is actually acrylic, and I have a huge body of acrylic paintings. But for some reason, I had some acrylic paintings, but I love the Southwest. I've been hiking in Sedona a lot. And that was the reason, Jeff, that I mainly was focusing on my oils, and I wanted to see the reaction to the florals versus the landscapes. And I did send in some of my more recent work. This painting was done quite a few years ago, actually.
Yeah, so that's interesting.
That's the main reason.
And
but it's interesting what you saw in it, Jeff. I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and so now we introduce another element of variety into the body of work, in that now we've got another medium. We go from oil to acrylic, and so again, you'll all remember, or those of you who've been back in the archive, that I kind of look at 6 key elements when I'm judging consistency, and certainly subject matter and style and theme are part of it. Presentation is part of it. The palette is part of it. And medium also is part of it. And so across, the 5 pieces that we saw, now if we add this 6th piece, we've added another variable. However, again, looking at this work, even though it is in a different medium and it is a different subject, the Southwest, as opposed to a coastal scene, I still see the style and the palette and kind of the approach to interpretation being very consistent. And once again, I wouldn't see an issue, even though it's a different medium, I wouldn't see an issue of having this work and some others of the Southwest mixed in and amongst the other pieces that you're doing. And certainly as you're putting a portfolio together, as you're interested in showing the work to galleries, it would be worth considering having some of these other pieces, especially if you've got a big back inventory added into that mix. Terry, I see you've got a hand up and a comment. Let me pull you in and get your comments.
Can you hear me?
Gotcha.
I didn't find an inconsistency throughout very many of the paintings because your colors are so strong. The only ones that threw me out a little bit, Crossing Waves, which is beautiful, but you go from such a realistic foreground and then into your more fantastical background. And there were just a couple of pieces on your website, and I went to Saatchi Art to see if I really had this reaction, but I think what it does, you set up such a colorful range that then when I see a more muted painting by you, I miss the transition from the more muted natural colors back to the more primary colors. And I don't know if that is intentional or, but those are the pieces that throw, you know, you were talking about consistency.
Yeah.
Those are actually only the pieces that throw me out, or the ones where I start out looking at a very realistic painting and then it switches within the painting to a different type of painting.
Yeah, any reaction to that, Santana?
Well, I'm not intending anything often when I paint, especially the foreground of that crossing waves. I had a lot of challenge with, but for me, the painting kind of paints itself in the end of the day. But I see what you're saying. I appreciate what you're saying, Terry. Thank you. Because I know parts of my paintings are more realistic looking and parts of them are more almost surrealistic. Some of the paintings are more surrealistic than
this one feels very united in composition and shapes and everything. And it's not a criticism, it was more of a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, this is kind of part of the experience. The experience that we're having looking at the work would be the experiences that an uninitiated viewer would have, and might not even be able to articulate or express as clearly the experience that they're having as they move from one piece to another. But it's a good argument for providing some range and some context. You know, and in my gallery, when I'm showing an artist's work, I do have to put some real thought into how the work, how the pieces by a particular artist, how each one is going to interact with the other work. What is the effect that's going to be achieved by showing this work together, and do all of these pieces work together? Are they harmonious enough, and yet not at the same time? You know, we wouldn't want a homogeneous group of work. We really want to give some back and forth, and so you know, certainly again, when you're putting together a portfolio or a website, it's worth being conscious of that, and it's worth kind of thinking about what you've done on your site, grouping like works together to kind of start to create a framework for visitors to the site to experience your art in hopefully a little bit more of an intentional way, rather than just throwing everything out there and letting people kind of sort through it on their own.
No, I am intentional of how I organize my portfolio and on how I put what I put where on the website. That is intentional. It's just in the painting, when I'm in the painting process, the intention gets taken over by the painting, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Patricia, I think I see you've got a hand up. Let's see if I can get you unmuted. Patricia was our featured artist last week, and good to have you back. Let's see, we still got you muted though. Let's see if I can get you. No, if you would click on, there we go. Got you, Patricia.
All right. I was thinking when I first saw the landscapes how simplistic they all were, and they are in a color palette, as opposed to the still lifes or the florals being of a different color palette. But when I saw the one that Jeff Green had pulled up, I thought she's combined the color palette, and it's no longer simplistic to me. There's a lot of dimension in this one that I see. That was what I'm thinking.
Yes, and that's an interesting observation, and I think that again, it's an argument for kind of having that range of work where you can see the push and pull of kind of the artist's perspective on the subject matter that they're treating, and how much detail is going to be created. And I do think, and I saw this in several of the comments, that yes, the compositions do have a simplicity to them. I would almost, and I'm struggling to find the right word, but maybe, you know, to a certain extent, there's some primitiveness to the approach in the work. And I have always been drawn to work that has a little bit of that element where, you know, I don't have to see every detail or, you know, have everything spelled out for me. And again, you mentioned impressionism, and it's kind of the same effect, but a different approach to getting it here. And so I guess, Santana, that begs the question. You mentioned the artwork kind of creates itself, but how do you know when it's finished? How do you know when you're done with the piece?
Good question. Well, that is a difficult one. And I have been known to overpaint. But just there comes a point that just somehow intuitively I know it's done. But back to your comment on primitive, I love the primitive painters and have considered myself kind of a primitive painter in some ways, like Rousseau.
Good. And I'm always careful with that
Rousseau
word
that
because
quality.
some people take it as an insult. Oh, primitive.
No,
or naive, or,
it just I like it. I like it.
as do I, as I mentioned. I do want to shift gears just a little bit. And you mentioned, and we're going to talk about pricing. And you mentioned in your request for feedback, you said, I had to lower my prices to fit the market of a co-op gallery and a restaurant I was showing in and Etsy. And we always have interesting discussions here about value and pricing. And I thought a comment, and I don't know if I have Cassandra here. I can't see everybody. I do see Cassandra, I think. And so maybe I can pull you in if you can hop in. And you mentioned, I think, something that is a good discussion point for us to have about those venues. Morning.
Yeah, good morning. Oh, you know, just speaking from experience, I've definitely had experience with Etsy and sorry, I'm looking here at
co-op and
co-op. Thank you. I haven't had experience with co-op. That area I'm a little bit naive, but I just was, you know, with my own experience as a photographer when I was doing commercial photography, I found that Facebook for me was the venue that worked the best to really help me gain momentum and you know, be paid for what I deserve to be paid for. But my feeling is just with Etsy and those co-ops is like, I call them time vampires.
Good.
Just, you know, it requires so much work and sucks up so much of your time that it almost feels like it takes away from effective marketing.
Yeah. And I would love to pull others of you into this question of these kind of alternate venues that have sprung up, because you know, as the internet was coming of age, and before Etsy, it was eBay, and you know, Amazon has made a foray into selling art. There have been a variety of venues that have come online, and the promise is great, right? You upload your artwork to our site, and we will bring the audience to you, and you will become a world famous multi-millionaire artist overnight. I mean, that's ultimately, we would hope that would be what would be happening, right? We're getting a new audience, they're seeing the work, and we're starting to generate sales. And of course, the actual results, and maybe there are a few artists who have indeed made it big on some of those venues. And I've seen artists and artisans on Etsy in particular who have built very successful businesses there. But I would wonder what the ratio is to those artists versus everyone else who just can't quite get traction there. And maybe, Santana, talk a little bit about what has been maybe the allure of an Etsy or co-op galleries or showing in restaurants, and because I think it is, I think what you'll be talking about is something that will resonate with many of us here in the audience.
Well, weirdly enough, Etsy was because you had a Canadian artist on who did those great big 40 by 30 faces. and she had an Etsy shop and she was doing really well. So I thought, well, I'll try it. But I don't like Etsy because you can't communicate with anyone, you know, if you have questions and this or that. I know a jeweler who's very successful on there, but it's not something that I actually spend much time on. And I think Cassandra is absolutely right. Now, the Co-op gallery, which I'm not in anymore, was the one gallery that responded to my gallery research, and it was a good experience, but it was too far away for me to be really involved in the co-op. And the restaurant, I was invited and I hung 10 pieces, and just as after I hung them, California went into the purple tier, so nobody got to see them. So
Yeah.
there you have it. But my goal is to get gallery representation, and I have sent out, probably not enough, but I still have not achieved that. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I think that experience, you know, especially as an artist, is really looking for opportunities and trying to get exposure.
Mhm.
That you know, you are going to experiment and see what venues offer opportunities to do that,
Mhm.
whether they be online or in you know, in the physical world, and you know, the online galleries, the Etsy's and eBay's and some Fine Art America and some of the other ones certainly offer a bit of a siren song. And I just wonder if I could get comments from anyone else in the panel on successes you've had there, challenges you've had there, what you've found as you've tried to sell online or in co-op galleries or other venues. Ellen, let me go to you first.
Well, I had an experience a while ago where this lady who had an Amazon, or no, yeah, she had a shop on Amazon, I think, and or no, eBay. Anyway, it doesn't matter. She had a shop, and she was had collectibles and stuff, and she wanted artists to be on there. And after I was on there for a while, and I saw some of the other artists that had stuff on there, and I contacted the other artists, they had the same experience that I did, that she was putting out a request to artists to get artists to put their work on there, basically to be a draw so that people would come and buy the less expensive collectible things that she had. I mean, and really less expensive, like, you know, $15, you know, stuff that you would never sell your art for.
Yeah.
And so basically, and the way I call it is bait and switch. You know, just use the art for the bait because it's beautiful to draw people to your store, and then they buy trinkets. You know, that's the way I would put it. And so I pulled my stuff from her because I didn't feel it was helping me at all. And it was just a way for her to capture the audience, to get them into her store to buy little stuff.
Yeah. Okay, good. And anyone want to echo Terry?
Yeah, I had written a note about the same thing. I think sometimes we're invited, even though it's a blanket invitation, I think fine artists are often invited onto some of these sites to validate the site itself. I have never been asked to lower a price, and I haven't gone on the sites to put my work up. But also the same with co-ops, and I'm in a co-op that I really enjoy, as well as some other galleries. But a lot of the invitations to join other co-ops, I feel like, are an effort to put an established artist in place so that they can sell the work from.
Help build credibility.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean I make anybody really credible. It's just that you can kind of feel that sometimes. And I think Jason said you don't want to be the top, necessarily the top person in the gallery.
Yeah.
Same thing on a website. But as far as online, probably a fourth to a third of my sales are on Instagram and Facebook. So that's maybe a different thing than you're talking about.
Yeah, and so I mean, there are a lot of variables at play, and it's probably not totally useful to lump all of those venues into one group and say they are or aren't worth your time or effort, because your mileage is going to vary depending on the work that you're doing and kind of the circumstances and variables in your artwork. But it just is important for us to think about how we're marshaling our resources
Yeah.
in terms of moving our career forward. Right now it may seem like your biggest resource is your inventory and your time. And so you can afford to spend some of that time in a variety of venues chasing after sales, and an Etsy and other online venues might seem like, well, it's not a huge investment of my time or effort, and maybe there's a potential for some reward there. So why wouldn't I do that? But ultimately, if you add up all of the 15 and 20 and 30 minutes that you're spending processing images and uploading them to sites, and if you take those and add them up over the course of a year, or certainly over a decade, boy, they really do start to add up. And we just really need to think about, okay, in terms of likely results, how can I best be investing my time for expanding my exposure and getting to sales? And my argument is that it's just getting your work online and into a venue that might generate sales is going to take a lot more work than you think it is going to. That you've got to have a real volume of inventory available in those venues, and then you got to put a lot of effort to make enough noise and get enough attention to get viewers on there, to get to the ones who might be qualified to buy. And boy, it's a big boulder you're trying to push up the mountain to get that to kind of start to take off. Can it be done? Yes, it can. But if you think it's going to be an easy path to overnight success, I would just urge us to consider our other options. I would suspect that your time would be better spent participating directly in live art events, art shows, and festivals where you have an opportunity to interact directly with collectors. And then, of course, I'm a big advocate of finding representation in galleries where you have the buyers going to the galleries and encountering your work there, that those efforts are going to be better spent. And so with that in mind, coming back around to the question of pricing, again, we really need to be intentional about our pricing and realize that our pricing is going to a certain extent determine the venues that are going to be appropriate for us to approach. And there's just so much downward pressure on the value of your artwork when you're showing in an Etsy or a co-op gallery where you see other artists around you who are priced much lower and you see their work selling. And, as Terry mentioned, if you're at the high end of that price spectrum, it's just going to be a constant pressure that you're going to feel that, oh boy, if I want to sell like these other artists, I need to undercut my pricing. And I would urge us to think in the other direction, to think, my values being what they are, instead of shifting my values to fit in the venues that I'm in, I should be looking for new venues that can sustain the higher price points. And Santana, talk a little bit about your pricing formula, and I can hop us back over here. What is your formula for pricing the work?
Well, I got the formula basically from Art Business Academy, which was multiply the width by the height and then times 2. But
So
I think my Hawaiian bouquet looks very exorbitantly expensive for an unknown artist. And maybe some of the others are a little bit too cheap. But one thing I wanted to say about Etsy, one last thing, I thought that I could sell some of my cheaper acrylic paintings that are on thinner canvases for maybe in the region of $300. That was what I was thinking, but
how did it work out?
I haven't sold a thing. I haven't really sold anything anywhere. Fine Arts America does not sell originals. They make prints. I make my own prints and cards every time I photograph. I get them professionally photographed, and I get 4 8.5 by 11 very nice images that I can mat and put in a sleeve, for little posters. And then they also will make cards, the people that photograph. But anyway, I'm also on Saatchi. And so I have had no success. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, but I don't really, I'm not very technically minded, and I'm just not sure exactly how to negotiate those two
Yeah.
venues.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I'd rather be in a physical gallery, and I just need to sit down and start doing more research and sending out again. So
yes, you do, Santana. Let me just
that's what I
echo
need
that.
to do.
That you
Yeah.
know, and Santana mentioned she's in the Art Business Academy, and that is the thrust of what we're doing there is
Mhm.
encouraging you to really focus on sitting down and building a list of galleries and then getting your work out
Mhm.
to a bunch of them. And ultimately, my argument is going to be that our persistence, the effort that we put into
Mhm.
that, into putting your portfolio in front of gallery owners, I mean, and it's not easy. I don't want to make it seem like it
Mhm.
is, and it's a little bit intimidating to a certain extent.
Mhm.
But ultimately, I would argue that the payoff for having done that work is going to not only be much higher, but it's going to be more sustaining for
Right.
your career in the
Right.
long run, because it is, you start to get a cumulative effect as you have opportunities to show your work in gallery venues, and start to get more exposure that you just can't get um, without doing a tremendous amount of work in all
Right.
of the other venues. And so, Santana, I would hope that our conversation here today
Yeah.
would fortify you in feeling that you've got a whole group of artists here and a gallery owner that feel like you're doing great work,
Mhm.
and that you've got a consistent body of work. The quality is there. That the next step should be to really push a portfolio out there to
Mhm.
galleries, and to start to get more opportunities to show in those kind of venues where you can get qualified buyers in. And maybe that's encouragement that we all need to have, that we should just be pushing forward with those opportunities and being a little dogged about that, in the same way that we would need to be in any other marketing efforts that we might make. We have done it. We always do it. We push right past our finish time. We've done it again today, and I'm afraid I've got to go because I've got an appointment coming up here in a few minutes. But Santana, I just want to thank you for sharing your artwork with us, and letting us learn a little bit about your background and your approach to creating, and to talk about the marketing of your work.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. And thank you so much, everyone, for the wonderful comments. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you
Okay.
all. It is the community here that makes this such an engaging and enjoyable experience, and I certainly appreciate all of your input and your being here. And then a reminder: next week is an Ask Me Anything session, so get your questions ready. We'll look forward to having a lively conversation next Wednesday, same time. Have a great week, everyone. We will talk to you soon.
Thank you.